everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Performance Cafe. We are continuing the topic. Let me put that down before I spell it. Where we are continuing on the topic of resilience. I must admit, I'm starting to wonder whether resilience is just one of those words that we bandy around and don't really get into, because actually now that I've really gone into the research of it, there's so much to tell. I could probably keep us here for quite some time. So today what we're going to speak about is different types of resilience. I think when we speak of resilience, we often think of grit. And the problem with that is that grit can be used in so many different ways. So for example, someone will say you've got to have grit, which means you must push through, you must never give up, you must keep going. And sometimes actually that's not the case. Sometimes having resilience is knowing when to let go. Sometimes people will say, you've got to have grit, and therefore you must lack emotional expression, and you must suppress your emotions, and that's not right either. And so I think I'd like us to talk about 5 different kinds of resilience that we can practice every day in order to move ourselves forward on this path of resilience. Now, the first form of resilience is, of course, cognitive resilience. And I say, of course, because anyone who's had anything to do with psychology will know about CBT. And that is Aaron Beck's theory around cognitive-based therapy, where they take a look at what's the most logical thing, what's really going on with your thinking, how do we change your mind? And of course, because cognitive-based therapy has been around for so long, we also see that Martin Seligman from the positive psychology sphere added to this with the concept of learned helplessness. It's basically, if you tie down an elephant, a big elephant, to a short little stick like this, and you give it a fright, why doesn't it run away? It's because it's learned when it was little, the stick was bigger. And so it's learned not to run away. And then, of course, we've got Carol Dweck adding her perspective on this, and probably, other than the positive psychology stuff, my absolute favorite, and that is growth mindset. I've spoken about it a gazillion times. If you go and look through our past videos, you'll probably see a mass of those. I think it is one of the best pieces of work, and they definitely define the way that we should be going, not just as people, but as all of humankind. And Carol Dweck spoke about having a growth mindset. And what I really love about that is this concept of yet, is that very often we would believe that we cannot grow, we cannot progress, we can't go further because I'm too old, I'm too this, I'm too stupid, I'm too that. She says all we need to do is add the word yet into our parlance, and then we will start finding ways to move ourselves forward and to continue growing. But let's quickly take a look at what cognitive resilience means, or what describes it. So firstly, it's cognitive. So it's the ability to adaptively cope with cognitive challenges and stresses. Right. So it's when the things that are in my mind are driving me crazy, that is when I need cognitive resilience. So for example, if I have a particular bias, I'm too old to learn. If I have self-doubt, I'm too stupid to learn. Or any other negative thinking patterns like, so many other people are learning to do the same thing. Maybe the market's going to be oversaturated. Maybe I shouldn't even try, right? So what we see is cognitively, using our intellects, we are shutting ourselves down and not going anywhere. So how do we get that cognitive resilience? Well, what we do is we practice cognitive restructuring techniques, and we find different problem-solving skills that are going to help us to cultivate this growth mindset. And that's exactly what Carol Dweck was saying, is that there's nothing that we can't learn. We know brain plasticity is a thing. We know that we can continue learning. We also know that learning doesn't necessarily have to lead to an award or recognition. We could learn for the love of just understanding a concept. And so one of the ways that we could do this is, for example, by reframing. So if I was to make a mistake, I could go into that place of self-doubt, of negative thinking, and think, I'm not good enough. I didn't study well enough. I didn't practice this well enough. Or I could say, okay, I did the following. Something went wrong. However, I've learned from it and therefore I can move on. And that is what growth mindset is. The growth mindset is I can continue learning until I know how to do this thing. I can continue practicing until I become good at this thing. So cognitive resilience enables individuals to really get to a point of clarity and creativity and resilience by reframing the way that we understand either a problem or failure. So let's take a look at a bit of cognitive resilience in action. So I'd like to introduce you to David. So David's an entrepreneur and he's having so many setbacks and failures while launching his new company. So, everything is going wrong. The orders are running late. He's not hiring enough people on time. He's got to carry on watching his cash flow. It's all over the show. It's a new business. There's not a fixed parameter yet on how much goes where, when. So what would he do? Well, he'd demonstrate that cognitive resilience by reframing his perspectives and his learnings from his experiences. So what has happened in my business since the first day? What's happened in my business in the past 3 months? What's happened in my business in the past week? What am I seeing? What am I learning from those experiences, interactions, maybe the metrics and the reporting that I'm seeing? And therefore, if I do it that way and I then have all this data, then this data becomes an opportunity to better forecast. How am I going to go? What I'm going to do going forward? So reporting is one way of doing it. Maybe David can call in mentors or peers. He can reflect on his mistakes and identify areas for improvement. And he could adjust strategies and he could find ways to bounce back from those setbacks. So that's cognitive resilience, right? That's when I'm dealing with my head. However, the second form of resilience is emotional resilience. Now here, of course, I can't even speak emotional resilience without talking about my all-time favorite, Susan David. The book's name is Emotional Agility. Please go and read it. It is it's a beautiful piece of work. It's a tour de force. And what we learn about emotional resilience is that this is about the ability to manage and adapt to my emotions effectively, especially when I'm in a whole lot of negative emotions. So what are we looking at? Well, basically it's things like coping with stress, anxiety, sadness, loss, or any other emotions. And it's not about not having the emotion. It's about dealing with it well. And, I really love the one big quote from Emotional Agility that I absolutely love is she says, emotions are data, not directives. So firstly, our emotions are data. If we gather the data and go, why am I feeling this way? What's happening for me here? What makes me think this so that I'm feeling this way? Then once we get to that particular point, then we've got the data. And once we've got that data, we understand how to move forward because we understand what the reasoning is. One of my other favorite books, Atlas of the Heart by Brené Brown, actually is literally a dictionary of emotions. Some people, for a variety of reasons, are raised to avoid or submerge their emotions. They don't actually want to talk about what's important for them emotionally. They've not been taught how to, and they haven't ever got the vocabulary. And I find that particular book really helps with that. So coming back to Susan David, data is emotions are data, not directives. What she's saying is once I've got the data, I can then move forward and I can respond. If I deal with data as a directive, if I just go, I feel angry, I'm going to be angry, I'm going to smack back. That is dealing with emotions as directives. And although we are expressing them, it's not in a healthy way. So that is why we first understand the emotions, then we understand how to move safely forward from them. Otherwise, we are just going to create an ever deepening hole. So emotional resilience enables us to bounce back from setbacks and maintain a sense of well-being amidst all of the ups and downs of life. So what would a practical example look like? I'd like you to imagine Sarah. She's a beautiful college student and she experiences high levels of stress and anxiety during exam periods. She really does not enjoy that kind of environment. She enjoys her projects, her teachers, her exams, her friends. The moment that it comes down to exam period, she is in a state. So you can imagine, and maybe we've all felt it, right? We've had that fear of performance anxiety around being about being tested, and she feels maybe overwhelmed and a little lost and very scared of failure, and maybe starts withdrawing from people because of these concerns, right? So what she needs to rely on is emotional resilience to firstly manage her emotions, and secondly, then to compose herself with. How could she do this? Well, firstly, mindfulness and meditation really help reduce stress, and they also increase emotional awareness. So not only am I reducing the stress in a healthy way, I'm not suppressing it, I'm just dealing with the healthy way, but I'm also becoming aware of what this emotionally is going on. What's the words that are coming out? What's the language? What's it saying to me? And then when I understand why the emotions are making me feel a particular way and why it concerns me, how it triggers me, then I can take that and deal effectively with all the pressure that's being felt at exam period. Right? So come exam time, I know I'm going to be stressed. What do? I make sure that I understand the emotional triggers and how I'm going to deal with them. Right. Right. Now, the third one, this is spiritual resilience. Now, here's enough to say, because I really feel like in the past decade or two, spiritual resilience has just like come next level. Firstly, my all-time favorite, Brene Brown. She, of course, speaks at length about vulnerability, shame, and resilience. And she speaks specifically of the spiritual resilience of meaning and purpose and connection and how that helps us. And of course, the other great name that one can't avoid here is Kristin Neff, who speaks extensively, and I think probably predominantly, about self-compassion. And I just love it. The other day, I was having a bit of a tough time, and it was because someone I knew was taking some strain. And a third person said to me, compassion means to suffer with. And so Kristin Neff's question is, are we suffering enough with ourselves? Are we sitting and holding safe space for ourselves, and instead of browbeating ourselves and talking ourselves down and being dismissive of ourselves? So beyond these two fabulous knowledge experts, spiritual resilience then speaks to finding meaning and purpose and connection to something greater than ourselves. And that even when we're in the midst of adversity, that we go to this spiritual or even place of belief. And so obviously we know that it's going to involve things like meditation, prayer, reflection, gratitude, and a sense of awe. And spiritual resilience gives a sense of inner strength, inner peace, and of resilience, which can then sustain one through these difficult times. What does that look like in practice? Well, I'd like to tell the story of John. John is a retiree, and unfortunately, recently, his wife, Anne, had passed away. So he faces a massive sense of loss of purposelessness. Not only am I not going to the office anymore, but now I've lost my wife as well. And you can think that, that's probably been most of John's life. And so what's happening is he's grieving deeply the loss of an identity at work, a loss of identity as someone's husband, and maybe he's feeling a little bit lost because maybe he doesn't feel he's getting support from anyone else. So what we would need to do is we'd have to help John find meaning and connection through his faith and his spirituality. And doing this by attending regular prayer and meditation, seeking solace and guidance from his spiritual beliefs, these spiritual organizations. Maybe he participates in rituals. Maybe he goes to his wife's grave frequently. Maybe community activities where he tries to connect with other individuals who work at the same company, who have retired. Maybe he finds community of a grief support group for husbands who have lost their wives. And of course, then there's always the faith community. And if we can harness some of this, it'll help him to navigate those emotional challenges of loss and find resilience in his spiritual beliefs. Number 4 is a difficult one for me. It's physical resilience, and it's really not that difficult, right? It's about how physically strong and healthy am I, and what is my well-being like, so that when a difficult or a challenging situation comes up, I actually can cope. That's what we want to do with resilience, right? We want to get through it. So the reason why it's kind of difficult for me is because there's no one person that I can really say stands out as someone who does, who has really taken the lead around physical resilience. Maybe it's as easy as that I need to get over myself. Because if you think about it, maybe we don't need much more clarity. We don't need someone to go out there and tell us about this, because we all understand the usefulness of regular exercise, of healthy eating, of adequate sleep, of managing chronic health conditions, of annual health screenings, right? Because we're trying to establish that physical resilience to withstand illness, injury, and other physical stresses, allowing us, of course, to function optimally and have what I think we all want, and that is vitality. Because we pretty much know that if our body doesn't have the batteries, doesn't have the battery power to carry us through trouble, then it's very difficult for us to continue progressing and moving forward. A physical example, well, that as well. An example of this is James. So James is a middle-aged professional, and suddenly he suffers a health crisis, and he has a chronic illness for which he's diagnosed entirely out of the blue. Now, I don't know if any of you, but I've had a couple of those moments where someone says, we think it's X when it comes to a health concern. And, you've got to wait 24 to 48 hours for tests to come back. And while I've always been really lucky and I've never been diagnosed with a chronic illness, there is that thing that I remember sitting thinking about all those things like, I'm so young, what if something happens to me? Who's going to take care of my family and my parents and my sister, and who's going to take care of my dogs, and what's going to happen to the business? And so what happens is, in that entire moment, your whole world just comes tumbling down on you, right? So what we don't want to do is get into that in the first place, right? What we want to do is take good enough care of ourselves so that we are unlikely to get there. But let's say one does. So in John's case, well, he could start a regular exercise routine. He could do things like swimming and yoga to improve his strength and his flexibility, and his physical resilience, right? He could eat better. He could focus on, eating good food, whole foods, what we call clean foods with no preservatives, and no sugary foods. Additionally, he also practices strength management techniques. So deep breathing, progressive muscle relaxation, and all of that to reduce the impact of the stress on his physical health, as well as just maintaining or improving the physical health itself. Then next up. Now, this is the first form of resilience that we take a look at that goes outside ourselves, really, because all the others have been my head, my heart, or my emotions, my spirituality, my physical body. But now we look at social resilience. Now, social resilience involves the ability to maintain healthy relationships and social connections. So that would be whether it's going well or it's going bad, which I really like about that perspective when I read it that way, is that often we think when it's going poorly with us, people need to come and support us. But actually, it's also about still being able to give during times of adversity. And I think no one would ask that one gives too much. But I think it is important to remember that specifically, it feels like nowadays, with so much pressure on everyone in the world and all the things that are happening politically and socially and in the environment, that everyone needs support. So there's always someone that needs a bit of support from us as well. So how do we show social resilience? Well, this includes seeking support from friends, asking for support from friends, from family, from the community. And I always love this because I do a lot of coaching and people so often say, oh, I wasn't raised to ask for help. I'll help myself. Or, everyone else is so busy. They don't, I don't want to bother them. They've got their families. And I get that. But then I always remind them that there's also something called the helper's high, which is literally serotonin and oxytocin that our body gives off and that we feel as a pleasurable experience in our bodies when we've helped someone else. In fact, it is so potent that when we see someone helping someone else, even as an observer, your oxytocin levels will rise in your body. So when we talk about asking for help, we are not asking, we don't want people to think of us as needy, but actually we do need people in that moment. And those with the empathy and the ability to communicate and collaborate and work together with others can provide us with that support. And again, we can provide them with that support when it comes their time to ask. So social resilience provides individuals with belonging, with connection, with support. And actually, and I think I mentioned this in one of the previous videos, the book Tribe explains it so well, and how important it is that actually we are healthier and happier when we have what is called a tribe. Now, the tribe can be 2 people or 1 person. It doesn't have to be 50 people. But the moment I know that there is someone I can reach out to for help when I need it, it actually makes me more resilient, even if I've never asked the question. And if you want to look at an amazing video, Kelly McGonigal has got a TED Talk, How to Make Stress Your Best Friend. And she covers a portion of that talk. The latter half of that talk speaks about the research around having support from others in order to become more or to become more resilient and using social means for that. Right, practical example. So Emily is a single mother and she's experiencing financial hardship. And then she loses her job after the closure of the business where she was working. Can you imagine? Single mother, lots of pressure on raising children and wanting to give them the best, right? I can't think of any parent who willingly goes out of their way to go, I'm going to see how difficult I can make it for my kids, even though sometimes we feel that might have been the case. But not only are you really battling as a single parent, but now you still lose your job. And now for anyone who's not working in the knowledge economy, if you lose your job, the only way to find another job is to go out and look for it, but you need to pay someone to sit the baby. So, where do you go? So Emily could be feeling very isolated, very overwhelmed. But what does she do? She relies on her social resilience to cope with the challenges she faces. She reaches out to friends and family for emotional support, and she's sharing those struggles, asking for advice, encouragement, and maybe even support. Maybe there is a granny who can take care of the kids at home while Emily's looking for work, and on the way she can pick up the ingredients for supper and then help make granny supper. So that's one less thing for granny to do, because granny might not be willing or able to move around outside the house. And so in an attempt or opportunity to connect with community resources and to get that practical assistance and the financial aid, that shows that social resilience has come up, saying that there is a broader society. There's a saying, it takes a village to raise a child, and Emily has very positively tapped into that. So those are our kinds of resiliences. So if we're taking a look at them, firstly, we've got these are not important in any particular order. I just do them because it's easier for me to remember the order. Firstly, we've got cognitive, then we've got emotional, we've got spiritual, we've got physical, and then we have social. And I'd like to just mention in closing, as I wrap this up, that I don't think that any one of these gets us where we need to be with resilience. I think, we probably would see that Emily had to use not just her social skills, but she had to use some emotional resilience, because she's got to keep her babies happy and sort of try and protect them from this impact. John, who lost his wife, we spoke about him going to the spiritual side, but we saw the spiritual side was about community as well. There were social skills in there as well. So I want you to imagine that these are like 5 little of those, like, I love the visual of, those little music mixers, and you can pull these up and down and use them as you want to. You pull this one up because you're applying it more, you pull that one down because you're applying it less. But they are definitely there in order to help you deal with these situations. Well, that's it from me for this episode. Where's my coffee? Can't wait for it. As always, if you've enjoyed this episode, please go and find us on all our social media channels, our podcast channels, and on our YouTube video channel. If you've got any questions, please leave those for us on any of our social media networks. We'd love to hear from you, and we will chat with you there and see what you have to say. We'd love to hear all your thoughts on our channel, what we cover, and what else you think we should cover. But until next time, I'll see you at the Performance Cafe.